So let me know when I need to make it.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need.
Let me talk to Sharon. I'm gonna do that later.
Yeah, no, that's.
That's not gonna be.
Yeah, the only one that's not gonna show up is Councilman.
Yeah, that's what we have on here. And we've got, what time is it?
Just before 9.
8:59.
Oh, we got a minute.
Really
A lot of your job. That's just my.
With this
Yeah,
relatively light agenda, we might need extra time.
The meetings are inversely proportional to the length of the agenda. Well, I was about it.
But it does happen.
Been in office a little while. It's just
We got time to ask questions, so let's talk.
Yesterday, we just did a talk just and actually, got thank you for telling us so nicely.
That's really good. That's,
But I've gotten, I've gotten no thank you.
Yeah,
I know, yeah, yeah.
Who's a technical person? I've been really hard on things lately.
What did they do to you?
What did I do?
What have they done to you?
I had a jacket with a short pocket. I leaned over and I dropped.
Oh my gosh.
2 pockets. One of them worked after sitting in rice for 3 days, the other one toast. So,
You used to get the new waterproof coats.
yes.
Yeah,
I have
iPhone
not
7.
yet gotten a case for my
Oh, really?
second work phone, for my work phone, and I think that was the difference.
Yeah.
Because when I turned it upside down, water dripped off. It was so disgusting. Like stereotypes.
My last phone fell on the ground without it didn't have a case on it. Or it had a really weak case and ultimately
That looks like a really stupid case.
that's what my wife gave me for case. Says you need to use this.
so, last time Maureen voted, said it's certain.
Okay. Sounds like it's
Okay.
Very hopeful.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Legislative Committee. And we have with us here in the office Janice Rutherford, Supervisor Rutherford, and on remote location, Dr. Bill Burke. Good morning, Dr. Burke.
Good morning.
So first thing on our agenda is the federal legislative issues. And we're going to ask Gary Loisman, who is on the line, to give us a short update on what's happening in Washington. We know that they're not in session now, but is anything happening there that you want to report on? Thank you. Gary.
Hi. Yeah, welcome everybody. Glad to be with you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Things are relatively quiet in Washington right now. I think I'm going to leave it to some of my other colleagues here to discuss more detail about the some of the congressional things going on. I just wanted to report today on the FAST Act Section 1413 provision that calls for national corridors for electric vehicle charging and hydrogen, propane, and natural gas fueling infrastructure. This is something I've reported on in the past. It's a regulatory initiative that was required by the FAST Act, and we're awaiting the Department of Transportation's announcement of the fueling corridors, where there will be infrastructure for fueling and electric vehicles. And they tell us at DOT that this announcement will be imminent in the next month or so. They haven't given an exact date, but we're watching it very closely. And one of the reasons this is happening is because a lot of the reports that we're reading are telling us that within 14, 15 years from now, about half or more of the vehicle fleet is going to be electric or alternative vehicles. And particularly, we're talking now more and more about automated vehicles, driverless vehicles, that sort of thing. Very much a lot of the thinking is that a lot of that, all of it almost, is going to be electric. And so this is a very important trend that's going on. And I had a chance here in the last couple of weeks to have a little chat with Congressman Sam Graves of Missouri, Republican, who's chairman of the House Highways Subcommittee. And he was pointing out that this trend is very important to his committee, and they're thinking about what they're going to be doing in Congress in the next few years. And what it's also leading to is a further discussion about how transportation, particularly at the federal level, but also at the local level, how transportation and related things like clean air initiatives and so forth are paid for. And, we've had the gas tax for so many years, but it's decreasing in its value and its importance. And so there's more and more discussion about the more we have these electric vehicles and alternative vehicles, that we get into some more and more talk about the vehicle miles traveled tax, paying for roads by charging every vehicle for how many miles they travel. And so that, according to Congressman Graves, is the new initiative that is going to get a lot more attention in the future. There are several state initiatives that are focused on that right now. And I think that's a topic that we're going to be following very closely as well, because it'll be important to how some of that money might be diverted into the clean air initiatives that we're most concerned about. So that's a quick report on one of the policy issues that we're looking at here in Washington. I hope that's helpful. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Gary. That's very helpful. That's been discussed here in California as well, looking to alternative ways to fund transportation and vehicle miles traveled has certainly been out at the forefront of those discussions. Do we have any questions for Gary from our committee members? Yes, my executive officer would like to ask a question, of course.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Gary, so I know you mentioned that the corridor designation was sort of focusing on the electrical aspect. So where is hydrogen fitting into this? And I'm curious, especially in light of Toyota's announcement of no internal combustion engines by 2050, and then Germany saying that the automakers should be going to some alternative zero emission by 2030. So is there consideration of hydrogen or other fuel technology? And is there any?
Oh yes, absolutely. In fact, that is part of this regulatory initiative. Hydrogen is part of it, and the question will be, whether these corridors are going to be for all alternatives. Some of the corridors might be only for electric, some might be only for natural gas or hydrogen. So that's why we're very closely watching for what the FHWA and the DOT come out with to give us, they've evaluated all the things you're talking about, and so that'll be part of the initiative that they will come out with here very soon, and we'll get a sense of where they're coming from on it. But the ideal vision is that hydrogen, natural gas, electric, and any other alternative vehicles would be part of these corridors, and that each corridor will have a new signage, just like the interstate system is signed with a shield sign. These alternative vehicle corridors will have their own signs that will designate them by the kind of infrastructure that is included in them. So I hope that's helpful.
I think the point that I'm trying to make is that I want to make sure that hydrogen is on equal footing. We've seen in the VW settlement that there's greater desires to push toward electrification and rapid charging and not so much on the hydrogen. So I just want to make sure that hydrogen tries to get equal billing as electrification and charging stations.
Well, your point is well taken, and I think if you remember the legislative run-up to this provision, hydrogen was not included originally in the way this was developed, and then several members chimed in and said they wanted it included, and so it was in the end, and so it was part of this provision. So that's what happened there.
Okay. Appreciate you keeping an eye on it for us.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Gary.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, Dr. Burke, please go ahead.
may I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
What, I keep hearing on newscasts and from various pundits that the House may shift in this election. And I'd like to ask if they have a conventional wisdom on how likely that is to happen.
Well, I think the conventional wisdom, as I would call it right now, is that will not happen, that it will stay Republican. But there's a possibility, It depends on, I think a lot of the talk is that it depends on how the presidential election goes. If it's a real landslide in the Democratic direction, there's more of a chance that the House will turn a Democrat. But they need about 30 seats there, and that's an uphill fight. And I think the Republicans I'm talking to feel fairly confident that the House will stay Republican at this point.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else, Dr. Burke?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Next, we'll have a report, very short report probably, from Cassidy. Amelia Jenkins, I believe, is on the line with us. And Amelia, would you have a short update for us?
Sure. Thanks so much. And I'm lucky enough to be out of DC in the west, on the West Coast today, although I'm in Oregon, but not California, but Oregon. But it's still better than DC. So just two quick things. Two quick things to point out. One is from a calendar perspective, looking at upcoming key dates. The post-election, Congress will reconvene on November the 14th, and I think that's where we will start to see leadership elections. Dr. Burke, to your question about the House majority changing, a lot of people are very bullish about it, but I think that the actual calculus is uphill, but you never know. I think regardless of if the majority changes or not, we're going to see a lot of changes in leadership, especially on the Republican side. And one thing we know for sure is that the House Energy and Commerce Committee chairmanship, if the Republicans maintain the majority, will be up for grabs this time. So that will directly impact their quality management district, who runs that committee. But to continue on with the calendar, the elections for leadership will be November 14th. The current funding bill runs through December 9th. So we will likely see Congress come back after the recess to start working on an end-of-the-year spending bill. And it is likely that included in that spending bill will be other provisions, the scope of which obviously will be dependent upon the election and how much people are willing to kind of clear the calendar before we start a new Congress. And we do have obviously the retirement of Senator Boxer, and she'll be likely looking at that end of the year session to get her issues completed. And then we have Senator Harry Reid, who's retiring, and Senator Barbara Mikulski of Maryland also. So they'll all be pushing for a robust end-of-the-year package. The other thing to point out to the committee is that as required under the Clean Air Act, EPA science advisors released a draft policy to look at the primary standard for NOx. The draft does not propose a change for NOx levels, but there is public comment on this proposal to keep NOx levels stable as part of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. And that comments will be accepted for that through December 8th. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Amelia? Okay, our CEO, Wayne Mastry, is going to ask a question. Go ahead, Wayne. Just jump in when you want to.
Thanks. Hi, Amelia. It's Wayne. Hey, quick question for
Hi,
you.
Wayne.
So, to what extent are you guys working with the transition teams?
That's a great question. So here's the official answer, which is the transition team is not really, they don't want to talk about too much right now publicly because everyone is focused on the election. Unofficially, however, there are a lot of conversations, there are a lot of lists looking at, key posts. Obviously, our firm has a relationship with Secretary Salazar, who's running the transition team, and we know people that are part of both the transition team that are working at the cabinet level, but also the White House level. They are still considering a lot of those conversations closed within the transition team because they want to keep everyone's focus on the election. But it is something, that we have relationships with those key folks, and lists are circulating for cabinet positions, but there's as much sort of positioning and jockeying and kabuki theater around it right now than anything else, and we'll just probably see more action and obviously, depending on the outcome of the election, more serious efforts the day after the election, I anticipate.
So let's talk perhaps later about some of the issues that we have, and I want to just make sure that they're getting before both teams.
Yeah, I think that's good, and I also think, to the extent that we're looking at the time frames for nominations for key cabinet posts, that may go faster than not. I mean, we're not going to know any of this until the election, but it is something to at least have some data points, reference points on, so that post-election you all will have a good idea about how fast or slow things may move.
Thanks. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Amelia?
Thanks, Wayne.
I have a question on this, on the EPA position on the low NOx standard. They had indicated in the phase 2 regulation that they were going to start looking at that. Could you give us a little bit of background on that and what this means and what are the prospects for turning that around and getting them to go into a low NOx regulation?
Yeah, that is, as I looked at our summary and thought a little bit about this before the meeting, I'm sort of wondering the same thing. And let me commit to working with Janie Weiss, who unfortunately couldn't be on the call today. And can I get you something back in writing that fleshes this out a little bit as to why they're not being more aggressive?
Yes, that would be good. And I know that Wayne will be working with you on that as well. So I will make sure. I'll mention that the California ARB is going forward as we speak to begin discussions on a low NOx regulation. And that is on the agenda for our meeting next week. So I think there's some movement in California to go in that direction, to begin the discussions about such a regulation. Okay, yes, Wayne.
Maybe I can provide a little bit of information that might be helpful to those on the phone and here. On Wednesday, we actually met with Chris Grenler and Carl Simon, Chris Grenler is in charge of the Office of Transportation and Air Quality for EPA, and that would be the group that would be moving forward. And they've actually reached out to us and have asked to set up a few meetings with the petitioners to the ultra low NOx standard, as well as CARB. And what we want to discuss are some of the specific elements of the petition, where EPA intends to move forward, and the actual timing by which they want to move forward. The question in my mind is that timing. Their advice was that they weren't aware of this 60-day window, and I said, well, having been a political appointee, I know that's what we had. And I spoke with a few other people, and they thought that they were familiar with it. EPA said that they were going to be looking into that. They understood the importance of the timing. I think that their initial response was, we may be able to respond within November, but it might take longer. And so we're pushing that they announce the timing sooner. And I think that CARB's announcement that they're moving ahead helps keep the pressure on EPA. So next week is the National Association of Clean Air Agency meeting, all of the agencies across the U.S. And I also had a chance to talk with Janet McCabe, the Assistant Administrator for EPA, on this issue. And we're going to get many of the petitioners, as well as representatives of NESCOM, MECA, and NACA itself, to talk with Janet and understand the importance of the timing as they move forward.
Okay, good. So movement's happening. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And I want to recognize Dr. Parker is here. Good morning, Dr. Parker. Thank you for joining us. And any other questions for Amelia? Okay, we'll move on to Kadish and Associates, and Chris Keurig, I believe, is on the phone for Kadish. Chris, are you there?
Hi there. I am here. Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Good morning. Can you give
Fantastic.
us a short update, please?
Good morning. Mark is actually sorry to miss the meeting. He's actually on a plane heading to Los Angeles right now. I just really want to echo a couple of things that Gary and Amelia had mentioned schedule-wise. Congress does return on the 14th. The current continuing resolution expires on December 9th. It's expected to be extended at that time, probably for 2 weeks. Everyone's kind of targeting December 23rd as the last day of session for sine die adjournment. Hopefully it happens before then, but you never know. Staff, Appropriations Committee staffs are working on their bills now. They're kind of under direction to have unresolved issues and whatnot, list, their committee list assembled by the 24th of this month, so that the leadership staff can then take over and begin, their negotiations before finally involving the White House with those talks. But despite that, that timing, we're still looking like probably going to be a CR, another CR at some point before the 9th. One of the issues that we're following here, that we're tracking here, is the reauthorization of the Diesel Emissions Reductions Act, DERA. It's currently now at the last few months of its 5-year authorization, and there are 2 bills in Congress to extend it for another 5 years. The Senate bill is by Senator Carper, that's actually on the Senate calendar now, and the odd occurrence, the House bill, which is by Congresswoman Renee Elmers from North Carolina, is actually as a part of the Senate energy package. So it's hopeful that either one of those vehicles, either the standalone or the Senate energy bill, House energy bill, that we can get that program reauthorized. You recall that it is funded appropriations-wise. Congressman Calvert has done a really good job of making sure that that account gets funded. But they'll need the authorization to be able to spend that money next year, and so we're looking to get those bills passed before the end of the calendar year. And then, other than that, I'm going to echo what Gary and Amelia said earlier. I'm hearing the House will pick up, Democrats in the House will pick up probably about 10 seats, maybe 10 to 12 seats. In terms of changing control, the Senate is much closer, much more of a toss-up than the House is, although I think the Senate will probably stay Republican also. I mean, so much of it will just depend on turnout in the presidential election in states like North Carolina and Missouri. So anyway, that's really all that I have to report. I'm happy to answer questions if anyone has any.
Okay, thank you. Is it fairly certain that the DERA will be reauthorized? If I heard you correctly, it sounds like we will get there.
Yeah, I think there's, the only reason it wouldn't get reauthorized if it gets caught up in the end of the year logjam. I think the biggest impediment to it now, moving it to standalone bill, is that it's been included as a part of the energy package. And I think, Senator Murkowski and the House side will be reticent to let individual parts of that package pass until that whole package passes or it becomes clear the package is not going to pass. So I think it's a bit of a waiting game. But yes, I think we'll probably get there.
Okay. Any questions for Chris and from our committee members? Anything, Wayne?
No, not at this time. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Chris, for your
Thank you.
report.
Thank you.
And we'll be looking forward to what happens in the next, several weeks. Big changes coming. Okay, for the state reports, we'll go to Gonzalez and Sons. Paul, I believe, is on the phone for Gonzalez. Paul, can you give us an update of what's happening?
Morning, Madam
at the state
Chair.
level? Good morning.
Morning, Madam Chair and members. Happy Friday to everyone. Starting off with some good news. Up here in Northern California, we're seeing our first storm of the year, it seems like. It's been quite a few months since we've seen some rain, and we're going to be getting quite a bit of it this weekend, so that's always a welcome sight. As you know, the legislature has adjourned for the year, and the governor has taken action on all of the bills that were sent to him. And I wanted to focus a little bit on the upcoming elections that are about 25 days away. There's a lot riding on these upcoming elections for the state. There are 17 ballot initiatives. I don't know if any of you have received your voters information guide, but I got mine. It looks more like a book than it does a voter guide. 223 pages long. So chalk up some time to study it over the weekend. There's quite a few ballot initiatives that will have some very big impacts on the state. One in particular is the 72-hour rule. This initiative proposes to limit the legislature to having the bills in print for 72 hours before they can pass any bills. This is aimed at trying to get rid of the end-of-session gut and amends and last-minute games that are played in the legislature. This is being sponsored by Charles Munger and former Assembly member and State Senator Sam Blakesley, who have been pushing this issue. And it could have some major impacts on the legislative process, especially as it comes towards the end of the year and legislative deadlines. Additionally, there's another voter initiative that proposes a voter approval for any bond over $2 billion. This is being sponsored by a farmer up here in the Central Valley by the name of Quarter Posse. He's going after the governor's Twin Tunnels proposal. So this too could have major impacts on future bonds for items such as transportation or air quality or anything of that sort, having to go to the voters for the approval rather than just the legislature. Additionally, there's the Prop 30 tax extension on the ballot, which would extend the tax extension for 12 years. It's the 1% on the highest earners. If this doesn't pass, the state could be facing a massive budget shortfall in the out years, in the billions of dollars. So that's another reason why this governor has been so fiscally prudent on all of these issues, vetoing items such as sales tax exemptions on feminine products and diapers, even went as far as vetoing the relief for the San Bernardino victims of the terrorist attacks. So, which arguably could be one-time money that should be spent, but this governor has just been so fiscally conservative on these issues that he's really toeing the line and trying to keep some fiscal stability here at the state. In addition to the massive amount of initiatives, all 80 Assembly seats are up, and half the Senate is up for election. The Assembly has the last of their old term limits class, the 6 years in the Assembly and the 8 in the Senate. The last of the 16 members are termed out, which means the entire Assembly will be under the new term limit, the 12 in either house. So the Senate's going to be a little bit shorter to follow. because some of the older term limit members who have 6 years in the Assembly and 8 in the Senate will go over to the Senate and finish out their terms. But we're at least seeing the full shift in the Assembly now. In addition to all of this is a big question in the Capitol of what happens if the legislature receives a 2/3 vote majority for the Democrats. The rumors circulating around the Capitol is if they can get 2/3 in both houses, they will try to push for a special session on transportation in November or December, or possibly in January to try and get something done right away on transportation. Additionally, there's also the question of will they do something to offset the Cal Chamber lawsuit for the cap and trade program and try and get some type of verification through the 2/3 vote of the legislature. So again, this all depends on them getting a 2/3 vote Democratic majority in the legislature, which is going to be a challenge in and of itself. But we're all waiting anxiously to see what's going to happen in 25 days to see what
Paul?
Does it look like he's gone? He's off. Okay, I think we'll go to Matt next, and maybe we can get Paul.
I have a, Madam
Yes,
Chair,
Yes, Dr. Parker.
can you ask Paul to explain to,
Dr.
I
Parker.
should say, expand
Dr.
on what he
Parker,
means?
Hold on a minute. We've lost him on our phone connection
Oh,
right
okay.
now. So we're gonna come back to him. We're gonna go now to Matt Klopfenstein, hope I'm saying that right, from Gonzales, Quintana. And then if we can get Paul back on the phone, we'll follow up with him. Matt, are you on the line? Did we lose him too? Matt? I think we've lost all our connections. Okay, Philip is going to have a report on the governor's final actions, vetoes and signings. And so Philip, go ahead and give us your report, and we'll try to get our consultants back on the line.
Sure. Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. In Sacramento, the state's legislative session officially ended on August 31st, which marked the end of the 2-year 2015-16 legislative cycle. And as usual, there was plenty of action and late amendments to key high-profile bills at the end of session. Climate change goals, the cap and trade program, and distribution of greenhouse gas reduction fund monies took center stage to finish off the legislative year. In the end, of course, through AB 1613, one of the budget trailer bills, $900 million was allocated based on the agreement between the governor and the legislative leadership, leaving $462 million in reserve for future appropriations. The cap and trade program and its 2020 sunset was not addressed. However, SB 32 was approved and signed by the governor to extend the greenhouse gas reduction targets to 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. Governor Brown had until September 30th to take final action on all the bills that were sent to his desk by the legislature. And overall, the governor vetoed 15% of 1,059 bills that were sent to him this year. Attached to the agenda is a summary of SCAQMD position bills and bills of interest and their final disposition based on the actions of the legislature and the governor. I'll highlight a few of those as going forward, some of the key bills. Some of the SCAQMD position bills, AB 1550, we've talked about that before, requiring 25% of GGRF funds basically to go to disadvantaged communities. Also requires an additional 5% to go to low-income communities throughout the state, and an additional 5% to go to low-income communities within a half mile of disadvantaged communities. We had a support position on that bill, and it was signed by the governor. SB 380 by Senator Pavley called for an immediate moratorium on natural gas injections at the Aliso Canyon Storage Facility. We had a support position on that bill, and it was signed by the governor. SB 887 by Pavley required Dogger to inspect before 2018 and annually thereafter and set standards for natural gas storage wells and to have older wells phased out. We had a support with work with author position, and that was chaptered and signed by the governor. SB 888 by Senator Allen establishes the Office of Emergency Services as the lead agency for future emergency responses to leaks of natural gases from natural gas facilities. We had a work with author position on that bill, and it was also signed by the governor. Going more towards EJ and toxic type bills, AB 118 by Santiago in conjunction with SB 93 by De Leon appropriated $176 million loan to DTSC from the general fund for Exide cleanup, job training, and pursuit of responsible parties. That was also signed by the governor. Both bills were in conjunction. Also, AB 2153 by Christina Garcia that required a dealer to accept at the point of transfer used lead acid batteries and prohibits the dealer from charging a fee. It also requires that dealer to collect a refundable deposit for someone buying a new lead acid battery from a person who does not provide a used battery during that transaction. That was also signed by the governor and is chaptered now. Going towards alt fuel vehicle type bills, AB 1697, the Alternative and Renewable Fuel and Vehicle Technology Program. Now that bill included clean job promotion as a prioritization factor for project selection. That was also signed by the governor. Some of the budget bills, SB 859, that budget trailer bill was the vehicle that, among other things, made changes to the CVRP program, including stricter income limits. For example, a single filer can only make up to $150,000, and also increases the incentive for low-income applicants by $500. That was signed by the governor. There's AB 2722 by Assemblymember Burke, and that creates the Transformative Climate Communities Program funded by $140 million in greenhouse gas reduction fund monies to reduce greenhouse gas and benefit disadvantaged communities. That was signed by the governor in conjunction with the overall deal. Also, SB 838 was another late budget trailer bill, and that includes language that's removing the cap of the green sticker program, and that allows for more alternative fuel single occupant vehicles to access the HOV lanes. That will still sunset by January 1st, 2019. Along the lines of greenhouse gas issues, there's of course AB 197. It adds 2 members of the legislature to the CARB board as ex officio non-voting members, provides that voting members of CARB board are appointed for staggered 6-year terms, and also on an expiration of those terms, they can be reappointed. And one other policy issue, it will direct CARB to prioritize direct emission reductions from stationary sources. That was double joined with SB 32, and they were both signed by the governor. Just a few more. SB 1383 by Senator Lara, that directs CARB to approve and begin implementing a strategy to reduce short-lived climate pollutant emissions below 2013 levels by 2030. That was signed by the governor. And the last one I have here is AB 1685 by Assemblymember Gomez. That's in response to the VW scandal. Increases penalties to $37,500 per action per vehicle for manufacturers or distributors who violate carbon emission standards or test procedures. And that was also signed by the governor. And that's just some of the highlights.
Okay, good. Okay. We have our consultants back online, so I think I'll go there right now, and then we can come back and ask questions of Philip if there's any questions on the bills. So Paul, I apologize for you getting cut off, but we are successful in getting you back in the room with us. So could you continue your report?
I apologize, Madam Chair, for being so boring in my presentation.
Wasn't that?
I don't know where I lost you guys, so I'll just start from the top again, if that's okay.
You're at the very end.
As you know, so the legislature is on interim recess now until January, as you all know, and the governor just got done signing all of his, or I should say taking action on all of his bills, which I believe Phil just gave an update on.
Yeah.
I'll focus a little bit on the elections. There's only 25 days coming up to the elections. We have 17 ballot initiatives with a 223-page voter guide to go through. That includes the 72-hour rule for all bills to be in print for 72 hours before the legislature can take any vote on it. This is the Charles Munger and former Assembly Member and State Senator Sam Blakesley initiative that could have some serious impacts on the legislative process. There's also the initiative for the voter approval for bonds of $2 billion or more. This is sponsored by Mr. Quarter Posse, who's a big farmer up here in Northern California, who is trying to stop the governor's twin tunnels. But this also could have big impacts on future bonds for transportation or air quality or any other type of need that we need, water. So they could have some serious impacts on us going forward. In addition, there's the Prop 30 tax extension for 12 years. This is the one that was put on the ballot 8 years ago and approved by voters for the 1% on highest earners. This extends it for another 12 years. If it doesn't get passed by the voters, the state could be facing a massive budget shortfall in the out years in the billions of dollars. So that too could have some serious impacts on the state. In addition to all the initiatives, there are all 80 assembly seats up and 20 of the Senate seats up. The Assembly has the last of the former term limit members being termed out. There's 16 of them that have the 6 years in the Assembly and the possible of 8 in the Senate. So the new Assembly after the November election will include all members in the 12-year term limit class. The Senate's going to be a little bit longer to follow because of those Assembly members who are being termed out. Most of them are going to the Senate. They will have some time over there under the old term limit law, so the Senate will be shorter to follow, or soon to follow, but it's going to be a few years out. And in addition to all this becomes what will the legislature do if they receive a 2/3 vote majority? And as you recall, we had that a few years ago. Quite honestly, they didn't do anything with it. As a matter of fact, they couldn't even come to an agreement on a legislative calendar between the Assembly and the Senate when they had 2/3 votes. So what they'll be able to do with it when they do have it, or if they could pick it up, is another question. The rumors circulating around the Capitol is if they can pick up 2/3 vote, they will come back for a special session on transportation and try and get a transportation plan done. Additionally, there's the question circulating about whether or not they will try to make a run at the cap and trade program and get a 2/3 vote, solidify it, and to eliminate the Cal Chamber lawsuit. So this all depends, again, on the legislature getting a 2/3 majority, which will be a challenge in and of itself, but we're all anxiously waiting to see what will happen in 25 days. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Paul, we do have a question from Dr. Parker. Dr. Parker, I'll turn to you now because you had earlier had a question for Paul.
Robert, you see if they hear?
Yeah, they can hear. I don't know.
The one make sure you got.
Yes. I have a question. When you say transportation, that, can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because exactly what do you define that to include? When you say that they're going to try to do something about expanding the transportation bills for infrastructure, and how will those bills directly affect us, if you know?
At this point, there's really been no deal struck. There's been negotiations, as you've known, throughout the legislative year. The governor came out with his $3.6 billion plan. The Republicans came out with their, $5 billion plan that had a lot of massive reforms in it. The Democrats came out with their own plan that was about $6 billion. They're going to try and find somewhere to meet in the middle. I know there's going to be some type of fees on electric vehicles, possible vehicle miles traveled. There's a lot of options up there, but most of the money will most likely go to infrastructure, things like that. But it's all been laid out in the governor's transportation plan and the legislature's two different transportation plans that I'd be happy to send over to you if you'd like.
Well, yeah, well, my follow-up question is there any possibility that we could piggyback on any of that for an increase in registration fees or anything of that nature that would help us directly?
Absolutely, I think there's opportunity to do that, and I think it's something that's been on our radar. And should the negotiations start to continue or start to pick back up again, it's definitely an option that we're looking at and working with staff on to see where we could to get something in there to benefit the district.
Okay, thank you.
Great,
David.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We'll continue to work with you on all these issues that come up in the next session. Any
I look forward to it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for Paul from anybody? No. Okay. Next, we'll have a report from Matt Klopfenstein with Gonzales Quintana. Matt, are you on the line?
I am.
Okay,
Made it
good.
back.
We lost you earlier, so glad to have you back with us. So please go ahead and give us a short report from your perspective.
Will do. Good morning, Madam Chair and members. I joined back in right when Philip was finishing up the legislative report, so I won't talk about many of the bills.
Okay.
Although I will just say that the governor signed pretty much all of the bills that we were following and supporting throughout the year, so overall that was good. A lot of them related to state funding for various carbon reduction programs, and so I just wanted to highlight a couple of the administrative actions that are going on right now. Post legislative session, a lot of the attention turns to the agencies up here in Sacramento. And so the first one is CARB, obviously the most important agency for us, and they are having a handful of hearings in the coming weeks to look at changes to their various low carbon transportation funding programs. So the main one will be next Friday, and they are looking at a change based on the AB 1613 budget appropriation of cap and trade funds. And unfortunately, the appropriation is smaller than we had hoped, and so most of the changes in their plan are just reductions of their current allocations. So we're seeing reductions in CVRP, reductions in the heavy-duty vehicles and off-road equipment. Generally, they have to go from a $500 million budget to a $363 million budget. So generally just small decreases across the board. Shifting gears over to Strategic Growth Council, Philip briefly mentioned AB 2722. SGC will be having a hearing on November 7th to discuss their proposal for funding transformative climate communities. It's worth noting that in their initial proposal, one of those will be in the city of LA, and then the other one will be in Fresno, and then a third potential one is not yet determined yet. I also wanted to mention that Governor Brown has released his zero-emission vehicle action plan for 2016. It touches on numerous subjects. I think one of the interesting ones is a commitment from the state to purchase 1,500 new electric vehicles and to install 4,500 charging stations at state buildings, mostly in parking for state employees and that sort of thing. And then finally, I wanted to touch on the VW settlement. I heard mention of it earlier on the call. It is up in 4 days before the federal judge to determine whether or not he will approve the $800 million for VW to spend in California and the $2 billion penalty, $380 million of which will come to California. Senator De Leon and a few Bay Area legislators here in California have all sent letters expressing concerns with the $800 million piece. And the concerns generally are around how much leeway and how much authority we give to VW to determine how that money is spent, and whether or not the state should play a larger role in setting up the plan for that fund. So that is my brief update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Matt. Any questions for Matt?
Madam Chairwoman.
Yes, Dr.
I'm a slow thinker, so I actually am going to slip back a little bit in this question.
Okay.
If, in fact, the transportation issue is going to be brought up, if they get a supermajority, which I have grave reservation that they're going to do that. But if that should happen, I think that this committee should consider going full out on the approach of raising our license plate registration fee, because I've been getting a lot of abuse about my suggestion of taking it to $50 or $60. But it would seem to me that we are as needy as the San Joaquin district. So if we got the same thing that they currently have, which was granted to them by the legislature, of $50, just the same thing, it would raise us $600 million a year for this district to. Now you couple that with what Mr. Nashry was talking about at our last board meeting as a basket of incentives and regulations, and I think you're in a very, very strong position to have the AQMP put in place in a manner which would be effective for the entire district. So my suggestion is that we keep an eye. If a supermajority is achieved, maybe we think about some people who could be hired to help us specifically on that issue for that short term, to try and get us to the place that San Joaquin is. That was my idea.
Thank you. I think that's, as I've brought this up before, an issue that we should be working on. I think there are ways, possibly with some outside help, to fashion such a rule so that we don't hurt the lower economic class of people who are ones that maybe can't afford $50 for their old car, but you have maybe a smaller fee for the older cars. But I think there's ways to work this so that it could be acceptable to the voters and to our constituents.
How did they do it? How did they do it in San Joaquin?
You know, Wayne, Philip.
Yeah, and it was for a specific purpose too, in terms of what it was funding, but I believe it was just a flat fee and increase.
Is there any place where they have a larger fee, say, for heavy-duty trucks? I don't know whether it's flat fee for truckers too.
I believe currently the heavy-duty trucks pay according to weight.
So there is a bigger fee for them.
Yeah, significantly more than what you pay for your.
Yeah, I would think that there's more impact from those trucks, so that they should pay more.
I think we had heard along the lines of $500 to $1,000.
You can get that high.
Yeah, up to that.
But we may want to work on this angle regardless of what happens with the turnover in the legislature. I think that's another point to bring up, Dr. Burke.
Well, you know, everybody wants to talk to me about trucks and, economically challenged communities, which I have a sensitivity to all that. But, they didn't care about that with San Joaquin. So, I'm at they got to explain to me what makes San Joaquin better than South Coast, or what makes their poor people impervious to this fee that can be done in South Coast. I just don't understand. It's not logical.
Well, and
it's just not logical.
I think part of the issue is the amount of fee. Their fee is 12. That may be more acceptable than 50 or 100 or whatever we might want to put on the table. So, but I think there's a lot of room to work here, and that your suggestion to work on this and maybe even to get a consultant to help us with this is an excellent one, because I think that is certainly an avenue to get some additional revenues that are a constant source. They aren't going away from year to year, that we could rely on for incentive programs. So anything else here? Yeah, Wayne, go ahead.
I would just add, Madam Chair, that we're actually looking into that very issue And before the admin committee, we'll have the discussion on consultants that can actually help us do what Dr. Burke is just saying.
Okay, good, you're ahead of us. Okay, any other comments or questions on this, on the reports from our state representatives? And we can also ask at this point any questions or discussion on the issues that Philip reported on the bills that have been signed and chaptered. Not seeing any. So we thought this would go faster than it did. It's always the way. But we also have a report here from the Home Rule Advisory Group. That's a written report. And I wonder if there's any comments from the public. Anyone here? No one here? And is there anyone in your location? I don't see anyone.
None here.
Okay. So we will adjourn this meeting until Thursday, November 10th. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. Janice.